good morning, good afternoon. This is a special meeting of the members of the State Liquor Authority. It's October 4th, 2018. There are three matters on today's calendar. Requests from Council's Office for summary orders of suspension. Present in Albany is Chairman Bradley and Commissioner Ford. Myself, Secretary Larry Donahue. In New York City is Commissioner Fan, and sitting in for Council Riano is Associate Council Marsico. Chairman, unless you have anything else, we'll go ahead with the items.
No, you can go ahead.
All right, the first item is 1962A on the agenda. Angels of the World, Inc. Again, it's a request for an emergency summary order of suspension.
Good afternoon. Council's office is requesting that the members issue an emergency summary suspension as to Angels of the World, which is an adult entertainment licensee located at 3217 College Point Boulevard in Flushing, Queens. Council's office submits that the licensee presents a clear and present threat to the public. On October 1st, there was a homicide of patron Jaquan Campbell that has received extensive media coverage. The victim briefly entered Angels, abruptly left with his girlfriend after telling her he had a bad feeling. And this is per news accounts. This is not from the police directly, as this homicide is still being investigated. He was apparently followed by four masked men who chased him in a car. They rammed his car, and eventually he was pulled out of the car and shot and killed. This homicide of a patron is not the first shooting related to the operation of Angels. On December 8th, 2017, at 4 a.m., a patron shot at another patron near the front entrance of the licensed premises. Fortunately, in that incident, there were no injuries.
What date was that?
December 8th of 2017.
Okay.
In addition, there have been two gunpoint robberies. I'm informed by the commanding officer that just as recently as September 22nd of 2018, there was a man who was robbed at gunpoint by two perpetrators within a block of the licensed premise. Also on May 8th, 2018, at 3 a.m., four patrons were robbed at gunpoint near the licensed premise. And from the memo, you would see that the police arrested two individuals who were observed standing across the street from the premises with defaced loaded firearms. It's not clear if they're waiting to rob somebody. I don't have further information from that, or if they're waiting to ambush somebody like the decedent. But there's two people were standing there, and according to the police, it is connected to the licensed premise. These incidents bring us to the second issue, which is a failure to supervise. Mr. Stupas is the sole principal on this license. He has a disciplinary history with the SLA involving two nightclubs he owned in the 115th and the 114th precinct. Mr. Stupas is well known in Queens nightlife circles and has the experience to know what it takes to avoid the mistakes he is currently making. He has chosen to shirk his responsibilities. Although Mr. Stupas does cooperate with the police when his patrons are victimized and does produce videotapes, he doesn't take the more important steps to avoid attracting the crowd that he's attracting. I'm informed by the Special Operations Lieutenant that the precinct has personally spoken to Mr. Stupas about the fact that he is using the same promoters that were used by another notorious adult entertainment nightclub called Aces, that I don't recall if the members remember, that the members canceled that license, and that license, it was subject of some litigation. That also received massive media coverage. So if Mr. Stupas ever reads the paper, even if he ignored the fact that it was in Queens, I'm sure he would have known. And that license was canceled finally after some litigation in September of 2017. So lo and behold, after September, we see this continuum of violence occurring at this premise. So to a large extent, it is the council's office position that he is responsible for the crowd and the violence that his premises is attracting. Our last point is that this premise is a drain on police resources. There have been over 260 911 calls in 2018 alone. And a majority of these calls are directed patrols that are being called over by the police when they're standing post in front of the premise. The commanding officer spoke to me and told me that he will not allow this premise to be open without having a marked or a police car posted in front of it. So this licensee presents a drain on the resources of the police department. I would also note that there was an earlier incident in February of 2017 where one of Mr. Stupas's patrons apparently struck a police officer with an ATV vehicle when he was stopped. So this operation is threatening the safety of everybody, including the police. For these reasons, we're requesting that the members issue a summary order of suspension.
So I'm not following, you're saying that there's a police officer directed to be parked in front of the establishment every day, and then there's 264 911 calls in addition to that?
No, so the 264 911 calls include 911 calls that are made by the police announcing that they are doing a directed patrol in front of a licensed premise.
I'm not following you. So when they park a car there, they're calling 911?
Yes, they call it over the Sprint, the radio, and that's captured in the reports as a call.
So they're not dialing 911, they're notifying their precinct that they're parking there.
Correct.
So how many actual 911 calls did they have?
I don't have the exact breakdown, but I do know that a majority of the 911 calls are as a result of the police calling over the fact that they're going to be posted there. Part of the problem, Chairman, is that a lot of these incidents aren't being called over to the police. These incidents many times are being discovered by the police when they're standing in the car and they see people. For example, there was one incident where they thought there was a shooting inside. We still don't know what happened. It was a very bizarre incident, according to the detective. There were 2 gunshot sounds that came out of the licensed premise, and the police ran in and never fully determined what was going on. But it appeared that it was clear that no, there were no muzzle. There was no real gunshot. But a lot of these things are being discovered through other ways other than the licensee calling 911.
All right, and the most recent incident, other than the victim and his girlfriend being customers and having left, is there anything that's attaching that crime to the place?
The investigation is still developing, so unfortunately the police department is unable to, give me further information. But the commanding officer did tell me that he was very concerned of the fact that he did have someone who was victimized on September 22nd who was robbed at gunpoint.
Well, that was my next question, because that also, is there anything other than the fact that that was a customer, is there anything connecting that to the bar?
No, just that he's a customer. In addition to the robberies, Chairman, I would also note that there are a lot of grand larceny complaints that are being generated out of the licensed premise. So not only are people being victimized inside, they're also being victimized outside, and that lends further credence to the fact that the crowd that is being attracted there is causing a problem. There's repeated complaints of grand larcenies inside. People saying,
I don't argue that, and certainly it's a drain on police resources. But the fact that a patron is being robbed after having left the place, I'm not saying it's not connected, but if you're going to charge them with disorderly conduct for that, you better find a connection.
oh no, I'm not
Because
charging them.
the victim of the crime is not by necessity a bad person. He's a victim.
No, I understand. No, I'm not saying that at all, Chairman. I'm not charging that as a disorderly premise. I'm charging that as part of the focal point, the fact that there's crimes that are occurring as a result of this licensee being in existence. There's violent crimes, people possessing weapons, people robbing people, people stealing from people as a direct result of the licensee being in operation.
I get that, but these 2 first ones, there's no evidence that the people perpetrating those crimes have anything to do or were ever in the premise.
That's correct. At this point, I don't have any further information from the police department.
Okay.
The masked men who followed him, someone saw them? I mean, were they outside the club waiting? I mean, how do we know they were masked men? I mean, I have the answer
Oh,
to
the
that.
girlfriend survived.
Right.
She saw them.
She saw them. Okay, that's how it was reported. Okay.
That's based on reading news reports.
And on 9/2/18 at approximately 4 a.m., they heard the gunshots inside. So we're saying here the police heard the gunshots themselves?
Yes, and I actually spoke to the assigned detective who clarified, because the police paperwork was a little bit unclear. So they ran in, and the police thought it sounded like gunshots, and there was a review of the videotape which showed that a person fell to the ground, and he thought perhaps he'd been shot, but he was not shot, he was uninjured, and the detectives carefully reviewed the videotape, and there was no evidence that there was actually a shot. So they don't know if it was just a balloon or somebody made a sound, but it appears that there was not a shot. There was just a panic with people running outside.
Okay.
And in the robbery in May, I'm assuming that was directly, they got robbed right as they left the building? Is that,
Yes.
okay.
Are they licensed for security? Forgive me if you answered that already.
Yes, they are permitted to have security.
Okay. And Lieutenant Lipolito advises the council's office that he has a patrol car dedicated to this place every night at its open. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can I clarify again where we think the 4 masked men came from?
Again, I based this on news accounts. The information is that the victim left. Some news accounts said he had a dispute inside. Some accounts say he just left abruptly, and then eventually they were followed by 4 masked men.
Do you know how far the initial contact was from the location when they got their car rammed? About.
Yeah, so I spoke to the precinct. They told me that the actual homicide was a quarter-mile away from the licensed premise.
But that was after, the initial contact was long before the homicide, correct? 'Cause the driver got away for a period of time after that.
Right. Yeah, I saw those news accounts too. I'm not sure when they were, avoiding each other in traffic or whatever avenue or highway it was. I'm not certain how far away that was from the licensed premise.
Okay.
Commissioner Fanny, do you have any questions?
Oh, I'm
No.
sorry. I'm sorry.
Yep.
I'm sorry. I hate to interrupt. I'm sorry, Secretary Donahue. I just did want to let the members know, there's another point that I do have, Counsel's office has another case open already against a licensed premise, case number 126573. And that case also just involves Focal Point. The primary charges in that case are Focal Point as a result of the repeated grand larcenies.
Are any of those incidents part of this?
No, that's a separate notice of pleading.
And that pleading's out already?
Yes.
And those are all grand larceny charges or?
Yes.
And police
Yes.
focal point?
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Fanny, any questions?
Nope.
You ready to vote?
Yep.
Commissioner Fanny?
Yes, premise been licensed for less than 3 years and have had multiple violent incidents as described by counsel. Based on the 4 points that she brings up, that the premise attracts a bad crowd, it's been a continuous focal point for police. The licensee's failure to supervise causes extensive drain on the police department. The premise and the licensee have disciplinary history, and the latest incident with a brutal murder on October 1st, it's clear that there's a threat to public safety and welfare, and I vote to summarily suspend the license.
Commissioner Ford?
It appears that although not everything here in these paperwork indicates inside the bar, it does look like a good deal of it is associated with it as an epicenter for crime and some violence. There are a couple instances here of mayhem taking place inside the establishment. And the main thing to me is the fact that all of this just leads to the point and backs up the substantiation by the police department that they have become a drain on resources if they have to dedicate a vehicle to it. So With all the 911 calls that have been reported so far, I will vote to summarily suspend as well.
I'm gonna vote to summarily suspend as well. The 10, I think there obviously are gaps in a couple of the incidents regarding whether they actually were related to the premise, but there is so many others in here that are clearly related to the premise, indicating violence inside or just around the premises. Plus, there are 2 melees that occurred in the bar, one in August of 2018 and the other in December of 2017. That it's obvious that this owner has a complete lack of supervision over the premises, and while there is security there, I don't know what they're doing, because it's obvious that people are bringing firearms in and around it and people are getting hurt. So I think it's clearly a danger to the welfare of the community. I vote to summarily suspend.
All right, then we're gonna move on to the next item.
So the only thing I would like to add is please follow up on those 2 incidents, because I'm sure the police are trying to connect them to the location, and my feeling is they probably are involved in the location, and if the guy does have videos, they will be able to identify people at some point.
Yes, Chairman.
Next item, 1962B, JJK and LK Corp. This is also a request for a summary order suspension.
Good afternoon, Stephen Armstrong appearing on behalf of Counsel's Office in support of the summary suspension of the premises known as Home, located at 2849 Steinway Street in Queens. Before I start, I just want to note that many of the incidents described in the memo are currently at the hearing stage under case number 125149. These are the charges outlined in the amended notice of pleading dated September 14th, 2018, which includes 33 charges and covers most of the prior incidents I outlined in the memo. These hearings began 3 weeks ago and should conclude tomorrow. Now, turning to the incident matter before us, the felony assault by a security guard that occurred inside the licensed premises on this past Sunday, September 30th. I hope you've all had a chance to see the video. I'll describe it very briefly. What the video shows is an individual who is clearly very intoxicated, gets into an argument with a security guard inside of the licensed premises. This individual is being restrained throughout the incident by a companion. At no point in the video does the security guard appear to be in serious danger, yet the security guard punches this individual 3 times in the face in rapid succession. According to police reports, this individual suffered a broken jaw, a laceration to the back of his head that required stitches, and he will require plastic surgery to fix injuries to his lip. And compounding the seriousness of this incident is the fact that the licensee is not permitted to have security on the premises. The method of operation submitted with the licensee's application stated that they would not use security personnel at the premises. And as serious and troubling as the injuries that resulted from this September 30th incident are, we are just as troubled by the licensee's long history of ignoring SLA rules and other provisions of the law. And when you view this incident in the larger context, the context of the last year, the licensee was issued their license on September 6th of 2017. And when you view it in this larger context, it becomes clear that the licensee has demonstrated that the steps taken by the SLA and the NYPD up to this point are insufficient to bring about the changes that need to occur at the premises. And as I outlined in the memo, there have been numerous violations at the premises beginning in January of this year. These violations include assaults, fights, disorderly groups of patrons in the street in front of the premises, a forcible touching, the over-serving of patrons, as well as numerous fire and health code violations. The community board sent a letter to the chairman dated September 21st of this year, where the community board stated both their and the 114th strong opposition to the renewal of this license. The community board notes that there have been 64 noise complaints, 51 911 calls, and 29 criminal court summonses issued at the premises in just over 1 year since being licensed. Now, putting these issues to the side for a moment, as I emphasized in the memo, the licensee's repeated failure to conform to their application by employing security guards is, I think, especially telling of the licensee's disregard for the law. The very first violation at the premises occurred on January 8th of this year. It involved an unlicensed security guard punching a patron in the face with brass knuckles inside of the premises. The licensee was charged at that time both with failure to conform for employing security personnel in violation of the method of operation and for employing an unlicensed security guard. Now, I don't want to go through every incident in the memo. I want to highlight just one other one in particular, and that is the March 18th incident. An individual was observed by police leaving the premises and placing a black firearm in the trunk of his car. This individual was detained, and upon further investigation, police discovered that he was working as an unlicensed security guard at the premises. A search of this individual's car revealed a black BB gun, an expandable baton, a radio capable of picking up police frequencies, and a gravity knife. And since January, there have been several other incidents directly involving security guards at the premises. There have also been several other incidents where, while the security guards are not directly at issue, police are noting in their reports that they make that there were security present at the location, and that should never be the case. On May 22nd of this year, the licensee applied to the SLA to change the method of operation to include 6 security guards. This application was denied on June 25th of this year. Now, even if all the incidents I described in the memo did not make licensee aware of the problem, this application makes clear that the licensee was fully aware that their existing method of operation did not permit security personnel at the premises. And despite the denial of this application on June 25th, on September 30th, in the video you saw, a security guard who was unlawfully employed at the premises broke the jaw of a patron. And what I think all this makes clear is that the licensee does not appear to believe that the premises can operate without security present, but instead of taking steps to address the underlying issues that have led to 51 911 calls and dozens of criminal court summonses, the licensee has continued to violate the same rules regarding the employment of security guards over and over again. And because of this, we recommend that this license be summarily suspended pursuant to Section 4013 of the State Administrative Procedure Act. Thank you. Any questions?
Are you charging them with police focal point here as well? In the charging that you're sending out? And the reason I ask you that is because it's obvious to me that they've been open just over a year. There have already been 5 different inspections by the NYPD and the SLA investigators, which to me, if their conduct requires us to visit them 5 separate times, that, not to mention the 51 911 calls and the other incidents that occurred, that would clearly amount to a police focal point.
Yes, I believe we added the focal point charge after speaking with the police officers while preparing them for the, I believe, the September 14th hearing. So we have added the focal point charge to the amended notice of pleading.
I have no question.
Commissioner Ford?
No, I don't have any questions either.
Commissioner Fan?
I don't have questions, thank you.
Ready to vote?
Yep.
All right, Commissioner Fan?
This premise have been licensed for just a year, and the licensee clearly proved to be unable to comply with applicable laws. Many incidents of violence and disturbance. I do realize it's sort of a catch-22 to cite them for not having security guards, but because of pending charges, they're not able to change their method of operation. But I think the licensee know that they're not supposed to be using security guards, and certainly not security guards that break people's jaw and have guns and are a threat to society. So I vote to summarily suspend due to a threat to public health, safety, and welfare.
And Commissioner Ford?
And to Commissioner Fan's point, I mean, yes, they did finally submit for authorization to have security guards after about 10, 11, 12 incidents that they finally decided to apply for that. But still, it still seems that the place is not being supervised correctly or legally, so I'm going to vote to summarily suspend as well.
Chairman
I'm
Brown?
going to vote to summarily suspend. It's clear that the public health, safety, and welfare requires a summary suspension at this point. As I mentioned, there were literally 5 march operations conducted over the last year at this premise. They've been told on numerous occasions that they shouldn't have security guards, yet not only do they have them, but they're completely unlicensed on numerous occasions, and those security guards appear to be assaulting people. It's obvious, based on what they found at the march operations as well as the security guard situation, that this owner, I don't think he's decided that he can't operate without security guards. I don't think he cares. There's a list of violations here that indicate to me that he really has no respect for the ABC law whatsoever. And the 51 911 calls are indicative of how much this is taxing the police department as well. So I'm going to vote to summarily suspend.
Okay, staying in Queens, the next item is 1962C, Central American Restaurant NY Inc.
R. Rockaway.
Just a minute.
Good afternoon. Miriam Sardar on behalf of Counsel's Office, presenting a case for emergency order of summary suspension pursuant to Section 401, subsection 3 of SAPA. This recommendation comes in light of an attempted murder that happened inside this licensed establishment on the night of September 23rd, just 1 week ago. At approximately 11:48 p.m. on September 23rd, a highly intoxicated male patron brutally stabbed two patrons that were drinking inside the establishment and smashed a glass beer bottle over a third female patron's head. One patron was stabbed in the chest with a knife, and the other patron was slashed in the face, leaving a 5-inch gaping wound open on the side of his face. All three victims had to seek emergency medical services, and when officers arrived, they did not expect that victim to survive. That victim remains in critical condition today. Just 2 weeks before that, on September 8th, officers responded to a call of another assault that happened inside the restaurant. A female patron punched two individuals. All three of them were extremely intoxicated. A few days before that incident, on September 2nd, another assault took place inside the restaurant. At approximately 3 o'clock in the morning, three individuals inside the restaurant attacked a patron and broke his nose. The fact that three different violent incidents occurred within a span of 1 month in this establishment shows that the licensee has a complete disregard for the health and welfare of its patrons. And I want to stress the fact that this establishment is currently licensed as a restaurant. It's not a nightclub, it's not a bar. The maximum occupancy of this restaurant is 75 individuals. There are only 8 tables inside this restaurant, and this is not the type of behavior that should be occurring inside a restaurant that serves food. This establishment has a history of violence that occurs on a consistent basis. We've received numerous police reports and 911 call logs of assaults and physical and verbal disputes that are constantly occurring at this premises. When the police officers respond to these calls at the establishment, they note that the patrons are always heavily intoxicated. This licensee has a clear problem with over-serving its patrons to the point of extreme intoxication, which is the root cause of the disorderly behavior and the violence that is occurring at this establishment. It's causing a serious safety problem in the community. To date, there are over 50 911 calls that have been made since the beginning of 2017, and this year alone, I estimate that there have been approximately 15 to 20 calls just for this year. This establishment is also a focal point in its community. Its continued operation is seriously endangering the health of the patrons that drink there. Just last week, 3 patrons were stabbed, and it's just bizarre that this is the type of behavior that is occurring at an establishment that is licensed as a restaurant. After the first 2 incidents that occurred in September of 2018, the licensee did not take any measures to ensure that the harassment and assaults that were happening inside the restaurant would stop, and because of that, an attempted murder took place inside the establishment. For this reason, it is evident to Counsel's Office that this focal point is operating as a risk to the safety, health, and welfare of the public, and it is recommended that this establishment be summarily suspended immediately. Thank you.
The guy who did the stabbing, it's alleged here that he was intoxicated. One who brutally stabbed the 2 patrons, smashed a glass bottle over a female patron's head. He was intoxicated. Well, all parties involved in the dispute were heavily intoxicated, including the perp.
Yes.
And you said one of those victims is still in critical condition, clinging to his life right now.
Yes, I believe the victim that was slashed in the face was not expected to survive. However, he fortunately did survive, but he's in critical condition.
So this place has been open since 2013.
Yes.
And there, other than the open case you have pending, there's nothing prior to that?
There is, in addition to this case that is open against the establishment, there is one other case that is open. And those charges include focal point and multiple disorderly premise charges, and I believe also sale to minor charges.
But those are all 2018 charges, right?
Those are all, I believe, from including incidents that happened over 2016, 2017, and 2018.
So they had 3 good years and then started to go downhill.
Yes. We have multiple police 911 calls and 311 calls that originate approximately in 2016, and then they continue pretty much every month up to September 2018.
And is it the same people involved in this place during that entire 5-year period?
Yes, to my knowledge, it's just the one principal licensee that has owned the premises since 2013.
So this is not making it as a restaurant, turn it into a nightclub.
Do you know what the capacity is of this place?
The
Just say,
max-
how-
Sorry? Commissioner?
yeah, how many tables did you say it was?
The maximum occupancy is 75 individuals, and there are 8 tables inside with 4 seats at each table.
Were they serving food when the inspections were done?
Yes, they were serving food. I believe that they are operating as a restaurant, but they're just over-serving patrons with beer and liquor, leading to the
And-
violence.
Is there practice to turn into a nightclub after 9 or 10 o'clock, or is it open like that all night?
I believe that it's open as a restaurant all night. I haven't heard anything from the precinct as to whether or not they're operating as a nightclub. I haven't heard reports of dancing or a DJ there, but the main
So
issue
it's
with
just
this,
it's just heavy drinking is what you're saying?
yes, it's over-serving patrons consistently.
Okay.
And can you repeat the number of 911 calls again?
From the beginning of 2017 to date, there have been over 50 911 calls, and approximately 15 to 20 of them have been from this year alone.
Okay.
And are they all, what types of complaints are they, do you know?
The majority of the complaints are disputes. They're assaults that are happening. You know, these patrons are getting drunk and they become violent towards one another.
Okay. I have no more questions.
Commissioner Fan, anything else?
Nope.
Is we ready to vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Fan?
Given the extremely violent incidents, sadly all in the past month, one attempted murder, licensee obviously is failing to operate the premises safely, is a drain on police department, constantly over-serving customers, and has posed an imminent threat to public health, safety, and welfare. I vote to summarily suspend this license for Central American Restaurant.
Commissioner Ford?
With approximately 50 calls, since the beginning of police calls since the beginning of 2017, these brutal stabbings that took place by, seems like everyone involved was overly intoxicated, and that seems to be the nature of the way this place is operating right now, looking at all these other incidents. So I vote to summarily suspend as well. It's a public safety issue at this point.
I'm gonna vote to summarily suspend based on those grounds. It's obvious it's a risk to the public health, safety, and welfare, and a public nuisance as well.
All right.
Thank you.
Chairman, do you have anything else?
No.
We are adjourned. Thank you very